Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Can everyone hear me? Good. If you're in the back rows there, the middle rows, there is a lot of text on the screen. If you'd like to move forward so you can see it a little better, you're welcome to. We are going to be sharing as we go through, there's some hyperlinks to different websites on here, which clearly is not going to help anybody tonight. But all the stuff is going to be shared on our website later this week, so you can go there. We've linked to a whole bunch of information where you can find out or read to your heart's content on a whole bunch of different things. So I just wanted to thank you all for coming tonight, especially when it's snowing out and the roads aren't fantastic. My name is Michael Tao. I'm the CAO for the town. And then Joanna Bowes over here is our Director of Development Services. So we'll be doing different parts of the presentation tonight. So just before we get started, in case there is a fire, there's emergency exit straight out the back where you came in, and then also the two doors here on the side. So if there's a fire and emergency, then please proceed outside that way. If you need washrooms while we're here, they are straight up the stairs at the back of the room there. If you have mobility issues, I believe there might be an accessible one on the main floor. So with that, we will move into it. So I want to acknowledge that the presentation tonight is going to have a lot of technical information. There's lots of words and other things. We're going to be sharing lots of information. So it is a technical presentation, but I understand there's also lots of emotion and feelings involved in this topic because it's about the town that we all live in and love and are concerned about its future. So growth and development and change affect any community. It's only natural that we all want the best for it and to know as much as possible. I was working on a family tree last summer at one point, and I was able to trace back my family in this area nearly 200 years. So trust me when I say that I and we care about what happens in this town and this community as much as you do. So having said that, there are still some details and some things we've continued to say from the beginning that we can't share at this point just because of the process. We are going to share as much as we can, but ask that, as everyone always has been, that we remain respectful. So we're going to go through a lot of information, and we received questions in advance. We have 18 of those that we'll go through tonight on as part of the presentation. I just have the questions listed on the slide. I'll go through the answers verbally, but again, the written answers will be online, and I'll show you a website later where you can get all that information after tonight. You'll notice that there's cards and pens on all your chairs. It's not a contest, but if you have questions that come up during tonight, or if you have questions you didn't ask in advance, feel free to write them down. I'm not sure that we'll have time to get to them tonight. We'll see how the timing of the presentation goes, but we're going to collect them all, and then we'll post answers to all those online after as well. So just a brief agenda so you know what we're going to talk about tonight. So there were some questions raised just about general development and how that works. I know we're here to hear about Kaivan, but we're just going to step through how development typically works in Perth and in any Ontario municipality, just to lay the groundwork a little bit. What guides planning and development, who does what? You know that Perth does some things, the county does some things, the province, the OLT, we'll talk about that. Who pays for it? There's been some questions around that. And again, what's going on with the golf course development. And then I'm going to go through the questions that we received in advance. So again, Joanna and I will be walking you through tonight. So why we're doing this, Perth until recently has not experienced this level of development. So this brings a lot of new challenges and opportunities. And our goal is to help bring the community together. I know there's been a whole lot of information and discussion and other things. But as I said, we truly want the community to understand how development works and how this process works. So we're going to look at a high-level overview of the development process, as I mentioned, insight to the different roles of different levels of government, and then a look at the one particular development we're looking at now, and then the questions. if we can get through the technical difficulties. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joanna for the Development 101.
He's quite a bit taller than me. Thanks again for coming. Really appreciate it. I kind of expected a bigger crowd, but this is good. It's maybe like a little more comfortable, and we can all look at each other and have a sort of understanding of where people are understanding or not following. And I'll try to look for confused faces, and if there are already, and I'll stop and try to explain things better if we need to. But again, thank you for coming out in the snow. And I know that probably most of you are here for the end part where we talk about the golf course development. But I also think what's critical is educating the public about the development process in general. There was a meeting held by the public within themselves. And I know within that meeting, there were a lot of questions that could have been answered if I had come and done this education session earlier. So I want to acknowledge that. And I'm going to try to touch on as many points as I can about development, who pays for it and different things like that, in the hopes that we can all sort of come at this from the same angle. So the first thing that I want to make clear, and we've had a lot of emails and comments about this, people are, I think, generally a little confused about private ownership versus public ownership of lands. So I just wanted to briefly explain that. There are lands, town-owned lands, or lands that are in public ownership. So for the municipality, like Perth, we own things like the pool, the arena, Public Works Garage, Town Hall. We have parklands. We have the ability to just purchase parklands if we want to, or when there's a development that happens, we can collect either cash in lieu of parkland and pocket all that together and purchase a park, or we can take 5% of the lands of the developer and have parkland, but either way, that land becomes ours. So those are publicly owned lands. And then we have utility right-of-ways. So water, sewer, anything like that's typically found underneath roadway or bridges, but often it can also be just on easements or right-of-ways. So those are town-owned lands. And the town has control over those lands and what happens on those. There are then private lands. So all other lands that are not town-owned lands are privately owned by individuals or corporations. So if there are privately owned lands, the town does not have any say in when land can be sold or who it can be sold to. We absolutely have no say in that matter. And we also can't prohibit development if it meets the official plan and zoning bylaw. So we can work with people who want to develop their land, but we can't prohibit something from happening. So I wanted to make that really clear. I think that was a question that we've had a lot of comments about. So I hope that clarifies something there. So I'm going to take you through the stages of a typical planning process. I know in this case, we're all here and it's not necessarily a typical planning process, but just for everyone to get a sense of what happens. This is sort of the flow chart, pretty straightforward. We'll go through it piece by piece as we go along. But the first thing that happens is there's a pre-consultation. Then the applicant makes an application. We send out public notice. There's a public meeting, a decision of council. If required, and depending on the application, there's a decision of the county. And then there are agreements signed and bylaws passed, at which point that application moves forward to building permit. So I'll just go through this piece by piece. Everyone following so far? Good, okay. So with pre-consultation, a developer will come in with sort of, I don't want to say a napkin sketch, because that's not very, here we need some sort of concept of what's going on, what the use is, a general feeling of what this, what the application is. Often we look for a site plan, which just shows the proposed structure and use on a site, on a survey. And so we meet with, or we ask them to meet with the development support team, which is generally the fire chief, building official, engineering, community services, and the planner. And so we walk them through, they tell us what they want to do, and then we walk them through or give them sort of like a recipe for how they need to move forward with this development. So we'll highlight things like, hey, there's a floodplain here. You may want to talk to the Conservation Authority, or you're beside the train tracks. There may be problems with noise. So you may need to do some sort of noise study. And so these are a list of some things that we can ask them. This isn't a complete list, but these are a list of some things we can ask them to do. So they're studies. They can be, like I said, in regards to compatibility, use compatibility, like you don't want to necessarily have a daycare beside an industrial use. So compatibility studies, environmental assessments, if we think there's contaminated land, environmental impact statements, traffic studies, noise studies, all these things to ensure that whatever is constructed is going to sort of match what's in the surrounding area or be compatible with. And then additionally, we ask them for drawings that show us what it looks like. So where does it sit on site? How far are you from lot lines? Where are you planting the trees? How's your lighting going to work? Are you just going to point all the light down onto your side, or is it going to shine into somebody else's yard? So we need to consider all of these things. So we basically say, here's the specific planning process you need to go through. Here's the information you need to provide us. And then we send them away to go get that information. That's the first stage. Okay, so once they do that, they gather up everything that's on our list. We have an actual form that we fill out with the check boxes in the process, and we send it to them. They come back with that checklist, and we have to be sure that everything they've handed in is as per that pre-consultation checklist we gave them. So once we have the application forms, the fees, the studies, and drawings, we can then deem the application complete. That doesn't mean that we don't have additional questions. It means we've received everything we've asked for. In going through all of the studies or all of the plans, we may notice inconsistencies or issues that we still have questions about, that we still want to know the answer to. So we circulate that to basically staff and agencies who we'll get into later. And sometimes we ask for additional information from them if it's just really lacking. But we do at that point, sorry, a second, I'm skipping ahead. If we get studies in, like for example, I'm not a biologist. We don't have a biologist on staff. So we don't have someone who's capable of reading a biology report. So if in some cases, if we get studies that we're not the qualified experts on, we circulate it for peer review, which is essentially I'll call up, for example, another biologist and say, hey, can you review this environmental impact statement? We want to be sure that it's followed the correct process, and we want to eliminate the bias within it, if there is any at all. So that's another part that we do. So the next step is generally when people, the public, get involved. It's the public notice. We issue a public notice of complete application and public notice and say, hey, we have a development here that's ready to go. We want to host a public meeting to inform everybody that this is what's happening. And then it's posted on our website, in the newspaper, and to it, we append on the website all those studies and all that information for the public to look at and review. And we issue that notice 10 days from the time the application is deemed complete. And so then we start accepting comments, not only from the public, but from the agencies like the Ministry of Transportation or the Conservation Authority, and then our own staff. And so essentially my role is to collect those comments and compile them. Oop. Okay, then the next step is a public meeting. So I think probably some of you have been to a public meeting for different developments. I see some of you are familiar and have been to a few of them. So a public meeting is held before the Committee of the Whole, which is essentially just council, but council is to approve things, Committee of the Whole is to hear things. So we present the planning application to council and to the public. And at that stage, both myself and the other directors involved, engineering, fire, we've collected all the comments, And we have to ensure that they meet the required legislation. And then we make a recommendation. So the meeting has to take place no sooner than 20 days from the date the public notice was issued. So it's like a fairly quick process, although I think developers would argue it's quite slow. But to review and get all that information and compile it and review it against policy does take some time. So once we get comments back from the public, we forward that back to the developer to make changes based on that feedback or considerations at any rate. And then if they have changes, we can come back for another public meeting, or if there aren't a pile of changes, we can just go forward to council. So that's the next step. Following adjustments of the application by the developer, it's brought forward to council. And I make a recommendation for approval or deferral or denial. And we can also do approval with conditions. So we approve this based on whatever conditions we feel are required to set. And these generally, the recommendation is generally ends up being a change or a zoning bylaw amendment, an official plan amendment, or a subdivision agreement. Sometimes it's just a little change to a bylaw. Like if someone wants to alter say the height of a sign, we can do an alteration to the sign bylaw, but typically it's zoning bylaw, official plan, or draft subdivision agreement. A council votes on whether they approve the application or not. So I make a recommendation. Council does not have to agree with me if they don't want to. I think generally, because we have to outline the policies, they do, but they are not required to. Okay, so the county, there's another slide on this, but just by way of trying to explain it, the county is responsible for some planning applications and the town is responsible for others. So if it falls under the purview of the county, then there has to be a decision by Lanark County on something. So an official plan amendment is a great example. We adopt the official plan, but then the county has to approve it. So step 6, if we just adopt it, then the county has to approve it if it's for the relevant process. And then after that, we draft agreements. They can be subdivision agreements. They can be a site plan control agreement. It's basically an agreement with the developer that says they're agreeing to develop in a particular way, with a particular set of drawings that every department has approved, that the council has approved, that the public has made comment on. And then on top of that, we collect securities for that. So if something goes astray or something goes amiss, we have those securities to go be able to walk in and fix that problem. So someone doesn't install a sidewalk correctly and then they go to business, or they just feel like they've done it correctly, but we don't. We have securities to be able to walk in there and make that change. So once all those agreements are completed, we send those agreements to the building department, and then they can move forward with the building permit process. So what guides planning and development? So this is a bit of a snore, if I'm honest, but it's a quick look at the relevant legislation. So everything starts from the provincial level. We have just had released the Provincial Planning Statement 2024. It's basically the province taking a look on areas of provincial interest that they want to weigh in on, that they think are important for us related to land use planning and development. Just really quickly for understanding, lots of things have changed in the last few years. So since 2021, there have been 11 changes to planning policy made, and significant major changes, as well as to other legislation that's sort of interrelated with provincial policy, including the Conservation Authorities Act, Heritage Act, and Development Charges Act. But that's maybe a lesson for another day. But just to keep that in mind, there's been a lot of changes that have happened in the last few years. So that's the first thing. So when we get an application in, we have to compare it against the provincial policy statement, Provincial Planning Statement 2024. And then we have to review it against the county committee sustainable official plan, our own Town of Perth official plan, and our comprehensive zoning bylaw. So I should have brought it with me, but it's about that thick when you put them all together. Just for my side of things, I have to go through a whole bunch of policy and be sure it meets all those requirements. The fire chief has a fire code. The building department has, I think it's probably about, I don't know, 4 inches of building code. There's a whole bunch of different legislation that we each view under our own lens. So when we've reviewed an application, it's been against all kinds of policy that's stacked up between all of us. It's quite a bit. So what's an official plan? We have one for the county and we have one for the town. The official plan has to reflect the provincial planning statement. It has to sort of line up with that. And then ours, which is lower tier, the Town of Perth official plan, has to align with the county's Sustainable Communities official plan. But what an official plan is, in essence, is just a guiding document of motherhood statements. We would like to see the town grow by a certain amount, and we want to keep, we want to be aware of climate change, we want to be aware of transportation, and we want to be aware of like any number of issues. And we just sort of identify those on maps, and we try to ensure that the development aligns with our official plan. It is not a legally enforceable document. It is a guiding policy, but it is helpful nonetheless when we're trying to figure out the direction we want to go in the future. So for anyone who's interested in that, we actually have an official plan public meeting happening tomorrow at Town Hall, if you want to weigh in your opinion on that as well. That's what an official plan is in a nutshell. So our official plan considers things like development strategies, population growth, housing, infrastructure, economic factors, heritage, economic development, public health and safety. It also has support policies related to roads, sidewalk, trails, hydro, archaeology, community sustainability, a whole lot of stuff. So again, when I'm reviewing any sort of planning application, these are all the things, all these policies are in there, and those are all things that I am required to consider when going through that development. Okay, zoning bylaw. So zoning bylaw is an enforceable document. It's sort of at the bottom of the heap, but it's the one that puts the official plan in action at a day-to-day level. So generally, a zoning bylaw is about land use. Like I talked about before, it sort of says you don't want to put a daycare or a nursery adjacent an industrial plant. It just doesn't make sense. So it looks at land compatibility and ensuring that conflicting land uses just never happen. It also talks about the type of structures allowed to be built. It talks about setbacks, dimensions, like lot dimensions, parking, height, all sorts of very, the nitty gritty details of how to develop a site and what is appropriate and what is functional. So a key takeaway from this meeting, I think, is that a building permit cannot be issued until a zoning is approved. So we have to make sure that everything falls in the right way. Like we have to be sure that everything is functional before building permit can be issued. Okay, who does what? The roles and responsibilities of different levels of government. This is, I think it's probably too small, so I would encourage you to go to the website once this post is posted and come have a look. So it divides it into province of Ontario, Lanark County, and Perth. And you can see that circle there, hopefully in the middle. The province, county, and town all have a role in land use planning. So I think that's a key message here again, that we try to talk about provincial policy statements and sustainable communities official plans and Town of Perth official plans. It's an effort between all levels of government. You'll also see in that section that roads, emergency planning, environment, natural resources, and parks. All of those really, really critical things are shared by all the levels of government. And then it splits off into other sections. But that, I encourage you to look at that main central circle where we all share those responsibilities, because that's all that kind of falls in the purview of land use planning. So I think I've been over this. It's just a hammer at home. What does the province do? The province provides the framework for how development is approved, and the municipal documents have to reflect provincial policy. So the official plans and the zoning bylaw have to match what the province lays out in the provincial policy statement. For municipalities, there are actually two municipalities. Lanark County is the upper tier municipality, and Perth is the lower tier municipality. So Lanark County, I said earlier that the planning applications are split between approvals. So the county is responsible for anything to do with division of land. So there are different ways you can divide land. You can do it through subdivision, you can do it through severance, and you can do it through part lot control. And so the county is responsible for all of those. They're the final approval authority. They're also the approval authority for official plan amendments. Perth is responsible for zoning bylaws, minor variances, and site plan control applications. These are all different tools under the Planning Act that we can use, and it's just far too complicated to include in this meeting to talk about each one of them individually. But the key takeaway is the county's responsible for the approval of some, and we are responsible for the rest. So every time there's a planning application, like I said, we circulate it to the public and to staff and to agencies. Agencies provide comments. They're called, what are they called? Like commenting. They're the commenting agencies. And so for an official plan, subdivision, severance, or part lot control, the town is only considered a commenting agency. We have no approval rights. We simply comment on an application, and then it's up to the county to approve it. And then for our types of applications, we get comments from groups like Hydro, Bell Canada, conservation authorities, and adjoining municipalities. For example, if it's really close to a border, we ask for comments from adjoining municipalities. So I put this slide in because I've had I think I've read probably over 300, 400 emails from people who are really interested in both the process as well as in this particular development. And so there's been some key themes. So one of them I wanted to sort of make a real slide about was the impact of new developments on infrastructure and services. So infrastructure capacity. When we look at developments, any development, not just key ones, but any development, we have to consider, can the existing systems handle the increased demand of water and wastewater and sewer? So, and anything else. So we look at waste sites, water towers, sewage lagoons, road capacity, traffic flow, emergency management, snow storage. And it's good to note that when we look at them, we have to ensure that we meet provincial minimum maintenance standards. So we're not allowed to go below those. They are a standard that we are required by the province to meet. And if we're not, they'll come in and we'll hear about it. And we're going to have to fix that problem very quickly. And then there's municipal services. So are there enough staff and resources to maintain the infrastructure? So let's say, 10 roads are added through development. Do we have the plows? Do we have the staff to drive the plows? Do we have the correct garbage collection? How about, is there enough room in the pool? Is there enough staff to handle all the new people coming in? These are things that we all have to consider when we're going through a development. Who pays for development? This is another really, really good question that I think I had considered it, but I hadn't considered that people wouldn't be aware of it because it's so much in my blood that I just didn't think it was something that I needed to talk about, but I sort of realized there has not been a lot of development here, so I think we all need to sort of have an awareness of what gets paid for by who. So during development, the developer pays the cost of infrastructure. So any pipes in the ground, roads, pump stations, stormwater management ponds, any of the infrastructure for that development is paid for by the developer, upfront cost. They also pay for their permits, they pay for the construction, they give us land contributions. I was talking about 5% parkland earlier. They are required to give us an area of parkland. Now, there's a lot of rules that have changed around that as to the form of the parks and where they're allowed to be, but it's still in there. They're still required to provide us parkland. So all the design and construction costs for those are the responsibility of the developer. It sits solely with them. So then what happens? You have, more people coming to your town through growth. And so more people need more things, right? Maybe we need more library books. Maybe we need another skating rink. Maybe we need, I'm trying to think, another pool. That's a terrible example because I've just given you a skating rink. But either way, we need more things. And so that shouldn't be borne, the cost of growth shouldn't be borne by the existing taxpayer. So what we do is we charge development charges. So every time there's a building permit issued, we collect a development charge, which is in the ballpark. I want to say, I meant to check before I got here, but I forgot. I think it's about $15,000 a door. So for every home that gets built, we collect a specific amount of money that goes towards development, or for the, to help with growth, whether it's buying new library books or building a pickleball court. We collect those charges. Purchasing new snow plows is another one. And the rates are set through the development charges bylaw. There's a link here so you guys can go have a look at it. And there's probably more on that later. So once everybody moves into the new homes, their property taxes, along with the existing property taxes, contribute to the town's budget for operation and maintenance now of all the roads and water and wastewater and staffing needs. So once the growth is complete and we have all those additional things added because of the growth, the taxpayers then, the ones that existed and the ones that grew, all pay taxes to maintain that infrastructure and maintain the staffing needs. So the municipality is responsible for maintaining all the infrastructure once the development is complete. So the other way we get funding is through grants. So Town of Perth, I can speak to, applies for a ton of grants, probably more than almost any other municipality I've seen. We don't get them all, but we apply for a lot of them. And so grants are like a one-time payment to pay for a specific thing. So for example, we just got good news the other day. We've received a provincial grant for $3 million from the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund to support the expansion of our wastewater lagoon. So that was announced January 27th of this year. So we get to build the 5th cell of our lagoon, which helps us be able to cope with the wastewater coming from developments, not just the golf course development, but from all the developments we're experiencing right now. And there are considerable developments on the table right now. So what do current taxpayers pay for when there's development? The answer is nothing. Taxpayers right now pay nothing as the development is being built. The only thing the taxpayers are responsible for at the end of the day is the maintenance of everything that goes in. But you also have the growth that also goes into that. So I hope that provides some clarity there. There were a lot of questions about that. Okay, I'm going to turn this back over to Michael to talk about what's going on with the golf course development.
Right, thank you. So moving on to the next part, thank you, Joanna, for all that information. I know that was a lot of information, and so was the rest of it too. Again, this will all be on our website. Please take a look. There's links in there and other things, so please have a look after that. So now we're going to take what we just learned and apply that as much as we can to the golf course development. Again, with the caveat that I mentioned at the beginning, that because we're in the midst of the Ontario Land Tribunal process, there's still things that we can't talk about or can't discuss publicly. There are a lot of publicly available documents, though, that answer a lot of these questions, from witness statements to initial reports done by the town. They are all online, and we're going to provide links to all those in one place. So you can go and read for hours or for days, and you can read all those things and figure out what our positions are. We're going to try to tell you as much as we can without me getting my hand slapped by our lawyer. Push the wrong button. So if you recall from Joanna's presentation a couple minutes ago, she talked us through the typical development process. So how a normal development would occur in town. So we're going to apply the lens of the golf course development over that right now and look at those things. I don't expect you to be able to read all that. Again, it'll be online later. So it started out in the same process. They came in for a pre-consultation. This happened from 2021 to May of 2023. Then an application on the second stage there was submitted to the county for a subdivision in 2022. We looked at the official plan, zoning bylaw, other documents at that time. Public notice went out in early 2023. Public meeting was held. I'm sure many of you were there at Algonquin College in August of 23. So there's links there to the presentation and the meeting recording from there if you'd like to relive those memories. So council then started moving ahead with that process. And it was at that point where it's red on my screen, I'm not sure what it is up there, but where things turned gray. So that's where the decision paused and things stepped outside of the normal process. So at that point in September of 2023, Kaivan appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal to have the process continue there. So at that point, the decision now rests with the OLT, again with some input yet from the town and the county, which we'll talk a little bit about. But that's where that process stopped at that point. So you see the decision of council, of town council, of the county, and then the final agreement. All that is on hold because it's at the provincial board at this point. We need development charges for new computer mice too. There we go. So this QR code will be up at the end too, or you can take a picture of that website there. So this is where all the information about Kaivan is. So the engage.spurth.ca/Kaivan. Again, if you find this presentation later, it'll have links to all the different documents and where you can find specific things. But this is the website to go to. There we go. So what we've heard, so I know there's a lot of discussion, the town's not listening, council's not listening. We're not aware of any of the issues. So we've gone through emails and comments and everything else and just things that we've looked at too. Our communications department did one of these word cloud things showing the frequency of the things that we've heard and the concerns that we're hearing. So yeah, these are a whole bunch of things here. So yes, these are things that we're aware of, that we're working through processes with various experts and engineers and planners and fire chiefs. So these are all things that we're looking at. We hear these concerns, council's heard these concerns. These are all addressed in various documents right here. So if you're not going to read through them all because you can do that later. But if you're interested in access, so the second bridge, or how are people going to get across if there's a fire? So Access Fire and Safety, if you click on that link, it'll bring you to the town's position as presented by our fire chief. If you're interested in the floodplain, there's 2 links there that will give you the whole description and the details and what positions and regulations and where we are in regards to the floodplain. Planning issues, species at risk, traffic and access, again, from a traffic perspective instead of just from the fire emergency access. Water and sewer, so what our capacity is and what capacity concerns are. So all these things are addressed in one format or another on here, but we'd be here till midnight if we read through all these documents with you. So the information is all there. So again, I encourage you, if you have particular concerns about those items, then go and read those particular documents. They are very comprehensive and do outline the concerns and the town's position and all the experts here that we've hired. You can see a couple town staff, but other ones are the external experts that we've hired to assist with this and to make sure that we're on the right page and that development occurs responsibly. So where do we go from here? So again, that typical development process got sidelined for the OLT, which is part of the process in Ontario. So the decision now is removed from the hands of the county and the town. So only the OLT can make a decision at this point. Again, we still have a role to play and we're still providing documents and testimony and other things. We're involved in discussions and mediations. So we still have a opportunity for input, but the final decision is no longer lies with town council. Doesn't lie with MPP John Jordan or whoever the next one is after the election. Doesn't lie with Scott Reed or any other agency. It's with the Ontario Land Tribunal. So all parties right now, so the developer, Lanark County, the town of Perth, we're all involved in that process. We're starting into the mediation process next week. So depending how that process goes, all the issues could get wrapped up in mediation and that could be the end of it. I suspect that's not likely, so we might still go to a hearing after that. So mediation provides an opportunity to discuss all those different topics we saw before and other areas of concern. So allows the town and the county to have an opportunity yet for input. The goal of mediation is to reduce the list of issues. So maybe there's some things that we're not that far apart on. And then this is a way that we can have input and we hopefully come to an agreement on some areas and reduce the amount of things that go to the hearing where we will have less input on. So if we can resolve some things at mediation, where town staff and other experts have input and where council can provide direction on our position, that's great. So the more things we can get done at mediation, then the less things are completely out of our control at the final hearing. So now on to the questions. So as I mentioned, we received a bunch of questions in advance. We're going to try to go through a whole bunch of those right now. I'm just going to speak to them. The written copy of all that will be, all the answers will be online later, so you can read through those again, because I know it's a whole bunch of information all at once. Again, if you came in after I made the announcement earlier, the little cue cards or recipe cards on your chair, if you want to write down other questions, if you have those, we're happy to take those at the end and add them to our responses as well. Right, so these are all questions that we received. So could you please clarify what specific statutes or rules of procedure prevent the town from sharing information? And with the exception of mediation, I've not been able to find anything that obliges the town to not share all the information with the community. So great question. And I acknowledge that no matter what answer I give you on this one right now, it's not going to be to your satisfaction, and I get that. As I mentioned at the beginning, we all care about how this unfolds, and unfortunately, there's some things that we can't talk about right now. We rely on the advice and guidance of our lawyer who's been through this process a million times before and is advising us where to draw the line. And to be fair, us being here tonight already made him a little bit uneasy, so hopefully we're demonstrating that we're here and we're listening. So while there is no official court ban on the file, there are some reasons why full disclosure in the public or in the media is not always a great thing at this point. So mediation and negotiations in our position are usually closed to the public, just like any legal negotiations. So by keeping some of those things confidential or close to the vest, we're not giving away our position that we might then give up advantage in negotiation with someone. So just like the very public tariff debates south of the border right now, for one side to give away all their position in advance potentially jeopardizes your position when you get to negotiation or to court. So in many instances, the submissions by the other parties, whether by us or by Kayavan, aren't subject to public release or require permission to be released. So where we're able to, we do that. Again, on that website I showed earlier. But so far, the developer has not always or in a timely fashion allowed us to release their submissions either. And then in some cases, the town receives information. We go back and forth with either with our experts or we're sharing different things. There's other different thoughts or considerations, or maybe council weighs in at a certain point. So for sharing information all along that process, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of things that are changing all the time. And then someone hears this part, someone hears that part, and things are changing. So there's value in waiting till positions become finalized before sharing. So it doesn't create more confusion than necessary. Again, I know that no matter what I say on this one, it's not going to be completely satisfactory. We are trying to share as much as we can on that website. Again, I know it's never quite enough. But. Maybe you can just go to the next slide. Okay. Next question. It seems like it's already covered, but I'm very interested in learning more about infrastructure planning and costs for growth and how these are managed and shared between developers, the town, and other levels of government. I think Joanna just did a great job of covering that between development charges, grants, and what existing taxpayers pay for. So there are significant costs to development, some related to building up new capacity on infrastructure, others related to maintenance. Right now, we have almost 1,800 housing units in various stages of application for planning or for building new housing units. So with all that, we're always considering and looking ahead to see what new infrastructure we need. So we have a transportation master plan, infrastructure master plan, recreation studies, water tower location study. So when we need a second water tower. We've done fire master plans and capacity plans. So when do we need a new fire truck? When do we need to build another fire station or move something north of Highway 7? Joanna talked about the official plan update, which we're in the midst of now, and the zoning bylaw. So all these studies that we're going through, looking ahead and planning for development. Not to beat a dead horse, but new infrastructure gets paid for by the developer. So within the subdivision, that developer will pay for the roads, water, sewer, parks, all that kind of stuff. Then once it's all done, then the taxpayers take it over and have to maintain it. But the initial cost is covered by the developer. So for other things that aren't just for one particular developer, like a new water tower or expanded sewage lagoon, we collect development charges for those, and that helps pay for that infrastructure. Let's make this over there. On that one, sure.
Okay, so they're gonna pay for the sewage and everything on the development site, but there will need to be enlargement on the larger pipes. That handle that influx. Who pays for that?
So the question was, the developer pays for everything that's on the site, but then what happens between the site and the sewage lagoon? The developer pays for everything related to that development. So in the broader, so expanding the lagoon itself, because that benefits more people than just the one developer, that we collect development charges for that, or we get grants from the province to pay for that. But everything that is only to the benefit of one particular developer, that developer pays for that cost.
But in this case, the development is so large that the larger pipes are gonna have to be enlarged as well on the main street of Perth and so on. So who pays for that?
The developer.
And you know what that extra cost would be?
That's part of their proposal yet. So I'm not sure. I don't think we've got to the fine details of the cost of every pipe yet, but anything that's for the benefit of that development is paid for by that developer. Some IT help from the back there. So while that's going, I'll just read you the next question. So could you also include some information on conflicts of interest and how they might apply to town staff and to council members? So assume you're aware that 2 council members have declared conflicts of interest on this file and are unable to participate in that discussion. So in general, a conflict of interest happens when there is a conflict between when you have a personal interest or financial interest, or you're related to someone, or a business dealing. Conflict happens when there's when that conflicts with the public good or the public benefit. So a non-development related example would be if you're a volunteer firefighter and you own a construction business. You go to put out a fire one night and you show up the next day with your business card and say, hey, I can fix your house for you. That would be a conflict. In this particular case, if someone is friends with the developer or owns property nearby that could be affected by it, either positively or negatively, that would be a conflict. So the town has a code of conduct that guides council and staff on this to make sure that everyone remains above board and not engaging in any conflict of interest, and to maintain public trust. We also have an integrity commissioner who is available to review or confirm whether there's any potential conflict. And all our staff who are involved in this are also professionals and have obligations to various provincial or national regulatory boards. We all have obligations to those to also help guide us in any potential conflict. Question 4. Oops. Oh, went too fast.
I have one more question.
Yes.
It's only 2 council members who have recused themselves.
So the question was, is there only 2 council members that have declared conflicts? And that is correct. There's 7 council members, including the mayor, and 2 have declared a conflict.
Were they both on the basis of friends with the developer?
One and the other has property nearby,
We all have property nearby.
very nearby. Hey, it's up to in Ontario, it's up to each individual council member to declare a conflict. It's not up to me or to staff or anyone else to tell them yes or no. It's up to each individual. And usually people err on the side of caution to avoid any perception of conflict.
Or it could be the opposite. That they don't want to be involved in issue of conflict.
The question was, or they could be avoiding an issue of conflict. I suppose that this could be true in some cases, but I don't suspect that's the case here. The next question: has the town of Perth considered hiring a town planning firm to prepare a master plan, a vision for how growth and development could take place in a phased and orderly fashion in accordance with the official plan? So yes, I've read through a list of plans before that we've done. We engage planning firms and experts, and there's a list of experts that we've hired there on the previous page. So we do that all the time to supplement our own staff. So we've completed a master plan for areas north of Highway 7 for how that lays out. I know that we're not talking about that in particular tonight. But there is an infrastructure master plan related to the golf course area. So both that particular development and the surrounding areas that the developer needs to take into consideration doing that. We're updating the official plan right now, and depending on how that unfolds, we might do a further secondary plan on particular areas for additional studies from that. So in short, yes, we do hire other external planning firms to assist in these ways. So also given the official plan, if one developer is allowed to build over 1,000 homes with over 2,500 residents, does that mean the town doesn't have any capacity for any other housing developers? So no, we are continuing to receive applications all the time. As I mentioned, we have over 1,800 units proposed or in various stages right now. So at present today, our infrastructure, our water and sewer can handle just over 8,000 people. As Joanna mentioned, we just got a grant from the province for $3 million to expand our sewage lagoon, which will bring our capacity up to 10,500, which at that point, every available piece of land in Perth will be built out. So with that grant, we're able to provide that capacity to whoever wants to come and build in Perth up to the 10.5. Yeah. Yes, it does. So the question was whether that 1,800 number included the golf course development, and yes, it does.
Excuse me, is that up to the latest proposal from Clivet for 1,069? Like
Go ahead.
1,800, all the other proposals?
So the numbers changed a little bit. It's about, so it's another thing you might be interested in looking at. The County of Lanark just did the growth study. It's in draft form right now. And they're looking about, we have 1,770 units in some form of planning application. That at the time when the information was provided was for the golf course lands at 940 units. Since then, obviously, the developer has changed that number, but also since then, we have received more applications for additional development. And so the number is probably higher than 1,770, but this was taken from the growth study that they've done. So it's, I mean, not significantly higher, but a little bit higher. And then the other thing, that growth study also said that in the next, like we're talking 2051, they figure there'll be another 1,000 units as infill, sort of within the town proper rather than out in a field somewhere. Yes.
How many units do we have now?
I actually don't know if we went backwards, if we have about 6,500. I can't do the math on this. If someone has a calculator, the average household is about 1.3. Anyways, I don't know, but about maybe 3,000 units or something. 1.3, 1.5. I'm saying that population is probably going to go up to 2.5, but right now our growth is lower than what I anticipated to be. So I don't know exactly the number of homes, but I'd say it's, 2 people per house is probably about 3,000-ish. Sir.
Is it unusual that we receive $3 million in funding? Or is it an extraordinary contribution at this particular time? Is it just coincidental that we have a developer in type of provincial government developing now exactly the $3 million
I believe we've applied for funding for the lagoon on several occasions. So it may just be the squeaky wheel gets the, what's it called? Squeaky wheel gets the grease? Squeaking wheel. Sorry, I'm just stop talking, Michael.
So we've been this week for a while, getting the funding now.
Yeah, so on that particular topic, so every time there's a municipal conference somewhere, the province sends its whole cabinet there, and you can go and request delegations and meet with them. So we've been doing that year after year, going to the province and asking for money to expand the sewage lagoon. I suspect in this case, as Joanna said, we annoyed them to the point that they said yes this time. Carleton Place is also growing rapidly. They got quite a large amount in the previous round of this. So I think it was just the way we wrote the grant, and then just the continual, so keep touching buttons, the continual asking for it. Sorry, up here first and then back there, and then we'll keep up with the.
Just to go forward on that question in another direction. Would Taiwan be able to develop this project if the lagoon was not expanded?
Would this development be able to go through if the lagoon wasn't expanded? It would be tight, and it depends if other people got ahead of them in the queue. Sorry, another question at the very back there.
Yes, the person been working under the 2019 official plan with this kind of development. If our official plan is ready by the maybe 10 years.
Sorry, the question was that we're using the 2019 official plan, and if we get the 2025 official plan passed shortly, would we be able to use it in mediation? The answer is no. So when an application comes in under particular policy documents, it is then reviewed under those policy documents in perpetuity. However, once those policy documents are changed, any new development that comes in would then be reviewed under the new official plan. So it's an opportunity. This is actually a very good opportunity. As difficult as this process has been, it helps point out to staff, where we have issues with our plan and how we can make it better and more thorough and more comprehensive and do a better job for Perth moving forward. It doesn't help the situation that we're in right now, but it helps build a stronger policy document going forward. And that's what happens. That's why these official plan documents get changed or updated every 5 years. If you took a look at my official plan and zoning bylaw documents, the minute I get a new one, I'm writing down changes. This needs to be more clear, because you can write it all you want, but you're always going to get challenged in different ways on them. And you have to always try to find ways to make them better or more clear or more effective. So these documents only get better with time. Like I said, doesn't go backwards, but it will help for the future. And Perth is starting to see that growth. And so I think this is actually a really good thing to be going through, to point out those, I don't want to say flaws, but point out the things where we could do better.
Right, thank you for the questions. I think if I may, I'll just go through the rest of the ones that we have up here. And then we seem to be doing pretty good for time. So then I think we'll have a chance for some questions at the end. If you can bear with me while we go through the ones that we had in advance. So next two are somewhat similar, so we can go through them quickly.
We just asked no questions, but on that one up there, where it says the OLT can bypass laws, and the OLT bypass laws.
I'm just about to answer that question. So next question here is, what is the point of going to the effort and expense of having town staff and county staff, local experts and taxpayers to develop official plans and other bylaws and documents and master plans? If a large developer with deep pockets and political connections can bypass all these things by going to OLT and having their desires granted. Small developers, whether it's me wanting to put in a pool in my backyard, or whether it's a well-connected developer with political connections and lots of money wanting to build something, we all start at the same spot and we all need to follow the same processes. Any one of us are able to ask for amendments to the zoning bylaw, or to the official plan, or to other things. Council can say yes or no to those things, and then any one, whether it's me putting in a pool or a risk developer putting in a subdivision, anyone has the ability to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal if they don't like the answer of council. So as Joanna mentioned, the official plan is a guiding document. It's not legally enforceable, but it is lined up with the provincial policy statement. And the zoning bylaw is a legally enforceable document, and those are available to anyone, and those are required to be followed by anyone who comes forward. I know the appearance here is that someone can go to the OLT and override the local community. That is the way that planning's set up in Ontario, and I suspect most other provinces that there is an appeal process if they don't like the decision of the local municipality.
And it's kind of respecting the zoning bylaws that are in place.
Sorry.
The answer to that, I'm not going to use the term respect, but everybody is able to ask for an amendment to an official plan or a zoning bylaw amendment. So that's to say, like I was talking about, an official plan, a zoning bylaw amendment is about use and about, say, setbacks and lot coverage. So if you were building a house and you wanted to do an addition and you were allowed to cover your lot with 60% lot coverage, and you said, I really need to include whatever it was, a bathroom or something. And so I need to cover the lot 65%. You have the ability to ask for either a minor variance or a zoning bylaw amendment to make a change to that zoning bylaw. So, so anybody has the ability to do that. And Kaivan is doing the same thing. They're saying, we don't really, we build a little bit differently. We're asking to amend your zoning bylaw to suit our standards or our needs or whatever based on the development. So I don't know if you can, I think it's just they're asking for an amendment to a plan that exists.
Who's the judge on that?
Well, right, so normally it would be, I would make a recommendation to council and council would make that decision. But at this point, that decision has been given over to the Ontario Land Tribunal to determine whether what they are asking for an amendment is acceptable or not, based on expert witnesses going and making comments or statements about the zoning bylaw generally. And so the Ontario Land Tribunal makes that decision.
Is it normally that, or can the town also have a right to enforce the zoning bylaw?
Normally, in a normal process, the town enforces the zoning bylaw. So I actually have the authority through bylaw to go out and say, hey, you've covered more of your property than you should, or you've built too close to your property line. And I can, in effect, if I want to go that far, I can take you to court and have you change that and or ask you to apply for a zoning bylaw amendment, in which case you would come before council and say, I'd like to amend the zoning bylaw to allow me to have.
So you have some power.
Not anymore. So in the standard process, I do have the power, is the answer, through council. But I think, I don't know if we're going to get to this, but at some point, there was a recommendation made to council with this development in particular that said, we need more information. I'm not going to approve it. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to defer it. We need more information. And council made that decision, but that was appealed because there wasn't a formal yes or no decision. So because that happened, I lose all my power. Council loses their power. County loses their power. And all those decisions are then determined by the Ontario Land Tribunal.
So can I ask, what type of discourse do you have? Does either the county or the town have with the OLT? You just mentioned that he has some kind of, back pocket advantage or negotiable type of thing that you can lay on the table at some point. But in fact, the OLT, do they actually understand the reasons why we are so upset with this application and that it doesn't meet the zoning bylaw, doesn't meet the official plan bylaw, it doesn't do any number of these things? And yet
you're standing here in front of us, trying to make excuses for the process. I believe that you're here to make excuses for a process because the work wasn't done before it went to the OLT.
So I understand your feelings. It is, so what's happened is, under the Planning Act, an application is filed and council has 120 days to make a decision. On that, after that 120 days is done, the developer is legally allowed to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So effectively, if we haven't made a decision, it's removed from us and it goes to the tribunal. That's out of everybody's hands. That's a provincial legislation that says if you haven't made a decision in 120 days, it goes to the tribunal.
So how do you avoid this happening?
I think if we had the answer to that, I think there'd be a lot of municipalities that would be very happy for that answer. They've actually decreased their time. It used to be 190 days. And then the province, in their wisdom, knocked that down to 120, which is, although it seems like a long time, by the time you have to organize to get things peer reviewed and actually review it under a whole bunch of legislation, particularly for complicated applications, it can take that long. Like, we were very close to making it into a decision. And oftentimes developers will wait for a longer period of time. They know it takes a long time to go through this stuff. And so they give you, if you feel like we're making progress in some ways, they'll wait quite a long time. We have a couple other developers here who are like, they're closing in on the 120 days and they're fine to wait. But some just, they have the right to appeal, so they do.
So essentially, you're saying the developers know the formula. They know when they want to release documents, when they should, when they can, when they won't.
Everybody,
They know they've got 120 days. They know that you as a county or a town don't have the expertise to follow through the proposal with all of your experts or pay them time or whatever, get them aligned. So it's not your fault. I'm not saying this is on you. I'm saying it's on the process. Process sucks.
I do.
Something which is going to potentially expand population between 46 and 61%. 61% that's 1,000.
It is.
So you understand what we're talking about here. This is almost like a brand new town being airlifted in or parachuted in, and you're now saying we don't really have much we can say. You can't even talk about the zoning of a particular lot to say this setback doesn't work because there's no landscape space. There's no place to park cars. There's no place to put trees. The kids, there's no recreational space in the backyard because it's like, well, it's basically the size of the kids, play.
So
I'm gonna shut up for a minute because the other people want to.
the planning process is not ideal. That's for sure. What I would encourage you to do up there, we had a list of expert witness statements. Mine, I think, is about 87 pages long. And I speak to all of those or many of those things from a professional standpoint of how it does or does not meet. Those expert witness statements will go to the tribunal. If there's a tribunal, I will be speaking at the tribunal, making expert statements for their consideration. So the hope is they will consider what all of us experts are saying. But ultimately, we can say our piece, but ultimately the decision is on them.
We're gonna keep going with the. We're gonna go through to be fair to all the people that submitted the written questions, we're gonna go through those first and we'll see how we're doing. So again, as I mentioned, the last two of these two questions are somewhat similar. So of course, small developers or individuals who wish to build have to follow all the laws, and we're right there on top of them. Why are there inconsistencies and how they're treated differently from the big guys? Again, as we talked about earlier, everyone's subject to the same guidelines and rules. Joanna mentioned that she and council have the ability when someone comes in and says, I want a zoning bylaw amendment so I can build a bathroom or a sun porch or an extra garage so I can park my convertible in there. Those things happen all the time where people get zoning bylaw amendments. It's just, they're not the scale of this particular one. So people don't, it's not in the limelight. People don't realize it. Unfortunately, in this case, it's big and they've gone to the OLT. So the bulk of the developments that go to the tribunal, and every municipality across Ontario has projects going to the OLT at some point. They're typically from major developers because they have the time and the money and are to go that way, and they have more complicated developments or requests. So next question was, a letter was sent to the provincial government signed by a number of municipalities asking for the OLT to be dissolved. We were not aware of this, or we weren't circulated on it. But I can say that coming from 3 generations of municipal government employees or council members, my personal belief is that planning decisions are best made at the local level, where council is responsible to the citizens and the people that live there. But unfortunately, that's not the process in Ontario. As Joanna mentioned, the process is not ideal. Sometimes it sucks. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. The province did amend. It used to be the Ontario Municipal Board. They did make some changes. So there is, I mean, there could be further changes in the future. But this is the system that we have right now. I heard another municipality in Lanark County has doubled their development charges. Do we have any similar plans? So development charges every 5 years need to be reviewed and updated every 5 years. So these are charges that the developer pays per household when they build, that contributes towards a new water tower, new fire truck, new snow plow, that kind of thing. They're not arbitrarily set. We can't just pick whatever number we want and say you're paying X amount per household. We have to plan ahead for the next 5-10 years and say, when we reach this many people, we're going to need a new fire truck. When we get to this level, we need a new arena, and so on. And then we calculate how much that costs and then divide that by the number of houses that we expect. And that's what the development charges are. So we're in the midst of a review or an update right now, just looking at the to make sure our one is current. Otherwise, the next official review is in 2029. Next question is, what is the town standard on building in the flood zone or the floodplain? Is it the 100-year flood zone? So if you recall from the one image before, we had the 3 different ovals of who does what. Floodplains and building in floodplains are not the responsibility of the town. The province created conservation authorities to look after that. So the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority is the expert on floodplains. They lay out the flood maps and the flood lines. So they might request additional information like an environmental impact statement or hydrogeological assessment. But I guess the important point to note here is they tell everyone where the floodplain is, and we can't issue a building permit if the RVCA doesn't sign off. So there is, well, the town doesn't control where people or whether someone builds in the floodplain. The RVCA says yes or no. If someone wants to build in the floodplain, but the RVCA says no, we can't legally issue a building permit. So there is guidelines and protections around building in the floodplain. So next question about the future of housing in Perth. Ontario is the 2nd highest flood-prone region in Canada. It's another water issue. With an average annual loss of 800 million, and flood depth may increase by climate change up to 60%. Will the town mitigate flood risk, budget for flood damage, and ensure infrastructure beside floodplains in order to help retain residents there? So right now, as I mentioned, the RVCA, the Conservation Authority, is responsible for flood zones or flood mapping. They're in the midst of updating their mapping for Lanark County right now. And they're responsible for saying yes or no to development in certain areas where there's concern over floodplain. We don't have any role with regards to flood insurance or setting flood limits. Again, it's solely the responsibility of the Conservation Authority. Is council fully committed to the official plan in every way when accepting any development? So while I can't speak for council, the official plan of any municipality in Ontario sets out the direction and guidance, and Joanna went through what the official plan is already, about how council with community input sees their community developing. So as noted earlier, it's not a legally enforceable document, but council in passing the official plans certainly commits to that, wanting to see growth follow that plan in our community. Sometimes there's a little give and take because every situation is different. So sometimes you might get a little more benefit in one area and compromising in another area. But in general, council's goal is to follow, clearly if they're passing documents and policies, their goal is to follow those because that's how they're responsible to you as the public. What is the definition of affordable? So we're talking about affordable housing. What's the definition of affordable? I think if you Google that, you'll get a million different answers for what affordable housing is. So we took the Lanark County definition. The county is responsible for social housing and for within the county, including Perth. So their definition is the least expensive of these two things. So either a unit where the rent does not exceed 30% of your gross annual household income, which they've set at $1,620 a month right now, or a unit which is for rent at or below the market average, which is $982 in this area. So if a unit is below $982 a month, the county determines that as affordable, or if it is less than 30% of your gross income, not exceeding 1620. That's the definition of affordable for in Lanark County. So again, I don't expect anyone to remember those numbers. We will post that online, and the county has that information too. So twice this year, the emergency department at the Perth Hospital was shut down because of lack of nurses and medical staff. This is directly related to lack of affordable housing for people in the workforce who can't afford $800,000 homes. Considering the shortage of housing for people in the workforce, is the town of Perth committed to 25% of new housing to be built to be affordable. So we've contacted the hospital. Like with any major development, we let major players know, the hospital, school boards, other people, so they can plan. We haven't got a significant response so far, but the hospital is always in the process of looking ahead for themselves as well. I've heard from other industries that housing availability and cost is also a concern for them for finding employees, so that I'm sure the same is true for nurses and other medical staff, but there's also shortages across the country right now. Certainly we'd like to have more affordable housing in town of all sorts. So all sorts of people and demographics can move here, live here. So our official plan does state 25% is the target for affordable housing right now. This is typically outlined as a condition in a subdivision agreement as we're working through the normal development process that we saw. Unfortunately, affordable housing usually requires significant subsidy or other support from governments. Typically that's at the county or provincial or federal level. So 25% is our goal. We don't always achieve that in particular developments, but this council is very committed to affordable housing. Last year, the town donated a piece of land near the fairgrounds so that an affordable housing project could be built. So this council is looking at other ways to making sure that affordable housing is built in this community. So not including this current proposal to build 1,000 housing units, how many new units are proposed or are being expected to be close to completion in the next 5 years? How many new units have developers and individuals applied to the town to build, and how many are currently in various stages of approval? So yes, at present, it's not on the website. So when someone comes to an application, we don't immediately post it on the website. It has to go through various phases first. Not everyone that comes and applies carries through on the whole project, but ones that typically that becomes public once that application comes forward to council. But ones that we can, or that are far enough along the process right now, I can speak to briefly. So there's about 8 of them here. Again, I don't expect you to remember numbers and addresses, but just to highlight, there is a lot of other infill development going on. So 55 Drummond Street, there's 18 units. 79 Wilson Street, there's 36 units. 125 Wilson Street, 63 units, a third of which are supposed to be affordable. Harris Street, 32 units. The second one on Harris Street of 104 units. 60 Drummond Street, 25 units. And then the next phase of the Perthmore subdivision is ready to go, or almost ready to go as well, which will be another 94 units. All these having various components of affordable housing for a total of about 370 new units that are in various stages of that approval process. So there's a lot of interest in people moving to Perth. So interesting on that one, with the exception of Perthmore, which is a new subdivision, all the others are building within or on existing streets or like infill within town, so adding more density within town. With the expected increase in population, is there a plan in place for public transportation? Or is the intention for all development to be car dependent, increasing the traffic load on existing streets? Great question. So Lanark County's received a grant from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to undertake a feasibility study for transit in the county. A little more challenging in a rural or very spread out area than in Toronto or Ottawa. The town has also completed an active transportation plan. So while not public transit, we're looking at ways that we can promote or increase the number of people that can walk or bike or take other transportation places. So there's a whole bunch of recommendations in that plan. It's available on our website. Not everything's going to happen day one because I think it's a $37 million price tag. But as new developments come in, we give them the active transportation plan and say, please incorporate these things into your development. As we rebuild streets and other things, we look at ways that we can promote that as well so that people can have the opportunity or be able to make choices to walk or to take a bike or some other mode of transportation. And then finally, Lanark Transportation also provides some bus or transit service within the county as well. Two more questions on here. So to the next question, to accommodate all planned development over the next 5 and 10 years, what does the town calculate will be needed with respect to capacity for water availability, sewage treatment, fire station, road creation and repair, and community recreation facilities? So we've touched on this in a couple of ways so far, so I won't belabor this point. But we have an extensive asset management plan. So we're referencing all sorts of documents tonight that if you ever suffer from insomnia, you can go and read any of these. This process or this plan outlines all the current infrastructure and assets that we have and when they need to replace. So our fire chief just took delivery of a new fire truck within the last week. So we have in our plan when the next one needs to be replaced, same for fire truck or plow trucks, pool, the arena, road sections, water, sewer, all that kind of stuff. So our plans manage that, but it also predicts at what population level we'll need that next fire truck or when we need to build the next water tower. So we continually update this every year as part of our budget process, saying what happened in the last year. These numbers still make sense. We need to update that. So the two big ones that are next in line. So as we've mentioned a couple of times, we got that $3 million grant to expand the lagoon. That'll be starting later this year. And we're also starting earlier in the process, but we're starting the process to build a second water tower.
You put the water tower in the same place as that one, or you just put it somewhere else?
The question was, are we going to put the water tower in the same spot. Right now, the plan would be to put it north of 7, so north of Canadian Tire.
Do high school, Marine and everything should go too, eh?
Ideally, yes. So the last question, the last written question submitted. So what concerns about the future of the town of Perth keep the town council and staff awake at night? Just curious. So that's a good one. So I suspect many of the same things that keep any of us awake. I can't speak for council, but in the countless hours I've spent with them over the years, I know that their overriding concern is how to make life better and how to do that while not raising taxes any more than they have to, and then how to try to balance those things. So other things, how to keep taxes low so people can keep more of what they make and not have to struggle every day. I know that is not a Perth issue. That's everywhere right now. At the same time, keeping our roads in good condition so we can walk and drive and bike safely on them and get where we need to go. Make sure we have clean water coming out of the taps. Making sure you can take your kids or your grandkids to swimming lessons or to the arena, to hockey practice, have clean parks to go to. Recently, what impacts our tariffs or trade wars going to have on our local industry? We have a lot of industry in town that sells a lot of their stuff across the border. What impact might that have both on businesses and then also all the employees that live here that might be subject to that? My cousin just got laid off for that reason a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sure there's others in town as well. How to plan for keeping our infrastructure safe and secure with increasing climate change events and other more big storms. How do we keep and attract staff when there's labor shortages for skilled people and people being drawn to other communities? Do I support the Maple Leafs or the Ottawa Senators? How do we promote more affordable housing without increasing the burden on everyone else, because that needs to be subsidized by someone? As a small municipality, how do we become that squeaky wheel that gets the grant funding like we just talked about, but also for our hospitals and schools? The City of Toronto gets, or the GTA gets new hospitals. Takes a lot more effort and attention for us to get an expanded or a new hospital. How to get young people interested in politics and municipal government. And then I guess my final comment on this one. So over the years, I've attended conferences across Ontario and across Canada. And actually just got back from accompanying my wife on a business trip on her business trip to Arizona. I went and did hiking or other things. But my point is that all these conferences, whether it's in Ontario, I talked to people in Arizona when we were networking there. No matter where I've talked to people, everyone has a story about Perth. When they ask where I work and I tell them, their eyes light up. I was there, or my parents were there when I was a kid. What a beautiful community. I remember this about that community. I've always wanted to go back there. I remember stopping there. It's one of the things that keeps me awake is how do we keep that magic of Perth alive in the midst of a faster, quickly changing world, and with all this growth and development, how do we keep Perth as a place that everyone has that story that makes their eyes light up when you talk to them? How do we keep that character and that Perth alive in the midst of all this change? I think we might have time for a couple other questions. But while you're sitting there, this QR code here will bring you to that engage.perth.ca site where all those documents are listed, all the expert witnesses. So if you want to hear our position on zoning bylaws with regard to Kayavan or floodplains or parks or whatever the case may be, you can go to that website. This presentation and all the answers to the questions will also be uploaded there. And if you are writing down questions now, if you want to bring them up or give it to any of the people in the back row, we'll make sure answers to those get up there as well. We will take a couple questions now. We have a little bit of time. But for those who don't want to stay, that was the end of the official thing. Thank you for coming. And again, I know that we probably didn't answer all your questions and that there's still things outstanding. We tried to push the line as much as we could without getting our hands slapped by our lawyer to try to share as much as we could as time goes on. Joanna and I have already talked about when we can host a next session to provide some more information. We'll start with you right over there.
I had sent in a question, but my question was in 1151, 23, but anyway, you did that, you were out of the office, anyway. My question is related to the condo apartment building on Rogers Road. Happens to be owned by Harbor Edge Mortgage and Investment, and has been for quite some time. What is the town's status regarding an apartment building?
The question was about the building that's existed on Rogers Road for some time, the condo or apartment building that has not been occupied yet. And what the status of that is, we're still waiting on some things from the developer to meet the occupancy requirements for the building code. We would love to see that building open and people living there too, especially when there's such a demand for housing, and we're trying to work with the developer to make sure that they can make that happen. That's right. That's right in the front row first. Did you have a question?
Oh, I was just wondering, initially, if I'm right, there was something like $200,000 to set aside to deal with the Kaiband development. I'm wondering, are you still within that margin, or how much is it costing the town alone to deal with this?
The question was how much of our budget we used for the Kaiband development. I forget where we were at the end of the year. I think it was less than 100,000 so far. It's right back there first, and then.
What can I do to support the town's position? Should we get by mediation if there's still unresolved issues? What can I do to help support the town when it goes before the Ontario Land Tribunal?
Thoughts? Question was, what can you do to help support the town to make sure that your concerns and our concerns get through to the OLT? And I'd pass the buck to Joanna first on that one, but.
That wasn't very nice of him. I think there are 64 participants right now that are listed to be able to make comments to the Ontario Land Tribunal and attend the hearing. I would actually have to check to see if participants are allowed to be added. I feel like that's probably not the case, but I would have to go and take a look. I think the best you can do is probably talk to the case management worker there. Her name will be listed on Engage Perth, and send emails that way. And then, I mean, you can continue to write to us with information that you have. Like I said, I know a lot of people think that we're not hearing. I have literally spent probably half my time in Perth reading like 12 to 15 page emails. I read every one of them. I try to respond at least to say I've received it, but I read all of them. And I know how much you guys care. And I genuinely do care. I used to come camping up here with my mom all the time. This is my place, you know, even if I don't actually live here, I really care for it. So any sort of comments or concerns you can forward, I can forward to the experts at hand. If it's traffic, I can forward to the traffic expert. If it's planning, I can consider it. If it's for engineering, all we can do is sort of put our brains together with information that we have or ideas that we have, and forward to the people who can hopefully make a judgment call on something.
First question is, I think it's simple to answer. Do U.S. professionals of the town council attend and have the opportunities to speak at the land tribunal meetings? And are your issues you bring up considered in those?
So I guess, first of all, to draw a line of distinction, we're town staff, not council. I know maybe that seems like semantics, but council provides direction as a whole to staff, and then as a staff with our expert witnesses and the lawyer. So Joanna is one of the witnesses, and yes, the staff and the lawyer are able to participate and speak and present all our information. I don't see any other hands up, so go ahead.
With the hospital at over capacity at this time, is there a plan for an increase in infrastructure change to accommodate the increased numbers of population?
So the question was, is there a plan for the hospital to expand to accommodate new population? Well, we have absolutely zero say over that. In discussions with the hospital CEO, just like we continually lobby for grants and for other things, the hospital is in the process of trying to get the attention of the provincial government too, to start that process.
I was wondering, at what population does a town require a full-time fire department? The 24/7 department all the time.
So the question was, at what population level does a town require a full-time fire department? I don't think there is a hard and fast number. The vast majority of fire departments in North America are volunteer departments, even partially or fully. So I don't foresee that happening in the lifespan of Perth. Sorry, back here first, then. Yep.
Thanks so much for doing this, Michael. It's super helpful. How much like the Ontario Land Tribunal decision, is it a yes, you're free to go do what you want, or can we like conditional? And they then say, okay, well, you get this.
I feel Joanna crowding me out here, but yes, it can certainly. I don't think it's a yes or no. My brother's a planner in Kingston and does this all the time. And from my discussions with him, yeah, very conditional. There can be yes, but all these things or all these conditions. But anyway, get more. Okay. I think, yeah, you first and then.
My question was, is there an appeal process if you're not happy with the OLT decision? Or court?
Something that actually I was going to look into. You used to be able to appeal, I want to say Superior Court. I'm with all the changes in legislation, I'm not clear on that, but if you write that down, it's something I have to look up anyways. That will jog my memory. I believe there should still be able to be an appeal to another court, but given the desire of the provincial government to build more homes faster, it may have been removed. Wouldn't surprise me, but I need to look that up.
Sorry, back there first.
Joanna, Michael, thank you very, very much for holding this meeting. It's been very, very helpful for me. So my question would be, I am one of the participants in the case, and I'm not very confident that my documentation has been. Thank you, Joanna, for reassuring us that you are reading on for our submissions. I'm not very confident that the lawyers are actually reading all the documentation, that it's all being considered. So if we proceed to a hearing and after mediation, I guess what I'm wondering is who's the point person at, so given that it's in the OLT's hands, who is the point person at the town if new information comes to light? Because I am planning to resubmit as a participant again this week, but if the lawyers are not reading it, who should if as new information comes to light, should I be kind of nudging a staff person, a council member to say, please try and ensure that the legal counsel is considering?
This person right here.
Yeah, send it to me. We'll send it to the Ontario Land Tribunal case manager and then just CC me on it. Okay?
Thank you.
All right.
I forget which order on this side, but I'll let you go first.
Actually, deferred to the Ontario Land Tribunal. They have a lot of great information, and I know it's all government Ontario stuff, including biographies of who the tribunal members are, and some information about the engagement that goes. And I did scroll, and I don't know how current it was, which is different Google when you read fast. But in terms of, they have like a certain number of days that you can put in a request to appeal their decision.
Thank you. Sorry, back here first and then you.
What lever do you have to on the size of the minimum lot size and setback, because that's really fair. This entire development is the actual minimum lot size.
I mean, I think I'm scary enough. I'm pretty tough. I can,
I hope so too.
I can, we do, I won't be able to get into it at all, but there is, I would call it some significant leverage that we'll have to wait and see how that plays out in mediation.
Because I think if that's addressed, then you are able to minimize the number of units. Like, floodplain, I did some research, I did some diagrams, and I said, 69 houses that are already proposed are within the floodplain. So you can take 69 plus, if they said 1,069 houses. Well, you can take the 69 right off the top. I don't know how they're gonna fit all the other houses in, but if they think they're gonna get 1,000 out of it on the site, means that the lots actually have to decrease in size, or the roads have to decrease in width, or the setbacks have to be reduced. I hope that you keep all of that kind of on the radar when you speak with people at OLT, because it's paramount.
Yeah.
They know that we don't want a formula and a solution that Richmond has. We do not want that. That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, oh, I've been out to visit Fox Run.
We know that.
Yeah, I think,
And we don't want that. I don't.
no, understood. I think there's, it's sort of maybe a topic for like another educational session, but there's different ways, looking at different built forms to get different densities and different types of development, different lot sizes. And I think it's just a matter of like sort of rejigging how we're thinking about this project. I'll leave it at that.
Just think here and then,
Along those lines, the OLT override the conservation authority with regard to
I believe at the end of the question was, can the OLT override the conservation authority with regards to the floodplain? I believe at the end of the day, they can make whatever decision they want, but in theory, the panel is made up of professionals and planners, and they're looking at evidence and supporting documentation from both sides and making an impartial, reasonable, and rational decision. And I'm not sure who was first. I think the gentleman in the back.
Answer the question about the appeal from Ontario Land Tribunal. I believe it's to divisional court. Divisional court is made up of 3 justices of the Supreme Court of Ontario.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So then, yep.
My question isn't about the Kaibon lot, but with regard to the whole development of that subdivision, when you start developing lands to the north, like, is there a way to have more control on what the streets will look like, what the building density will be like? Like, is that a secondary plan that you do so that you can sort of define more what you would want? Where this was sort of like a blank canvas, and then Kaibon got to come in and sort of decide what they wanted, and then you reviewed.
I'm trying to figure out how to answer this nicely. It's not a blank canvas. There is an official plan that lays out densities and percentage of high density, medium density, low density, where those should be located, whether it's on an arterial road. You could have higher density on arterial roads and then like lower density on local streets and that sort of thing. That's all laid out in the official plan for how we'd like to see that happen. The developer, as is anybody's right, came in and asked for an amendment, which was fairly significant. And so it seems as though it's maybe a blank slate. So that's something that we have to take into consideration. You know, what do we have versus what is being proposed? But I think we do have it's not a secondary plan, but we have the infrastructure master plan from 2019 that actually shows sort of where we'd like to see things. I think we're sort of going a little bit with that. And then going forward, when we have this official plan updated, the next step in 5 years is to do a completely new official plan, at which point I would like to see secondary plans on specific pieces of property that will lay out where things are going to go.
So that does help you, then the secondary plan helps you define where things.
It can, yeah, it can absolutely, you can sort of place on it, you know, we'd like to set aside a block for a school, or we'd like to set aside a block for a recreation complex, or the streets will generally be in these areas. So that's kind of moving forward what we'd like to do.
Sorry, you and then over there.
About the bridge. Second access route. I'm surprised it hasn't come up tonight. We see that that's one of the most critical problems involving this development. And I'm wondering if, I'm just asking what you can say about whether there'll be a second access, how that will affect safety, and how it will affect construction if it goes forward to the town.
Can't say, the question was about the second access and what we can say about that, or about the second bridge. Can't say a whole lot. I think it's okay to say that in some format there will be a second bridge or second crossing. The one page of links there with all the expert witnesses, that if you click on the traffic one, that'll speak to that and provide a lot more detail and hopefully help you sleep. Not from boredom, but from being satisfied that there's a second crossing.
Or boredom.
Or boredom. So are you and then at the back?
I'm just curious on, as the construction's being done, to get sewer gas lines in, that's gonna be on Rogers Road. Is that which way they're going, or are they going somewhere else to put in sewer gas lines or diesel?
That's a good question. It was where all the servicing's coming from, like water, sewer, gas lines. Water and sewer down Rogers Road. The other ones, I'm not sure where they're drawing that from.
Sewer gas is gonna be on Rogers.
Water, sewer down Rogers Road.
And that's all, maybe communication lines.
Yeah, the other ones, I'm not sure. I can't.
So having Rogers Road, knowing that they just recently had to put the new apartment building in there, they had to blast. And if anybody lives near John and Tom Street, know how long that took for people directing where would the traffic flow to, because we get a lot coming up Rogers to on Peter Street. So directing traffic, where would it go then?
But
Up Drummond Street?
the question was about where would traffic go if Rogers Road was under construction. That's a question for months or years from now. As part of the process to be a construction management plan where they propose layouts and traffic management plans and where traffic's going to go, and then we'd work with the developer at that point on where it goes.
Can we not come in off the Scotch line? Alternate route, a land route?
The question was, can they come off Scotch line? I think we're getting into questions that are too detailed that haven't been discussed or proposed yet. We're still looking at the process is still with whether it makes sense and whether they can do the development. So.
It's a lot of traffic goes over that way to avoid the town, because the downtown is study in the summer. It's a madness.
So you're in a position to negotiate where the second bridge might go. Probably in a position to be able to inform the developer of where all of their construction materials and concrete trucks and their own trailers, like where that's going to be located, because it's not coming off the Peter Street Bridge.
Yeah, we have different levels of control over different things. Again, read through those documents to see commentary on some of that. And then some of that's beyond the purview of the OLT, and that'll come with discussions later, but you have more.
I was just gonna say construction is unfortunately not part of the Ontario Land Tribunal purview. So it's something that we have to deal with as a separate issue with the construction management plan.
Your number one decision is that there is a second bridge, and that it doesn't conflict with traffic and people that live basically Peter Street, correct?
Please review the expert witness statements.
I think you'll find that your concern is not unique if you read the ones that we just linked there. And I know that people are leaving, and I think I said thank you before, but thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate that you came out on a snowy night. If you have written cards, you can bring them up to us or leave them on the table here. We will try to get answers to those and post it on our website by the end of this week. If there are any last minute questions, happy to take them still. Otherwise, please feel free to, you don't have to stay, but any last questions? Sure. Please.
Climate change lens policy. How is that being used? How's that being used?
So the question was about the town's climate lens policy. The OLT doesn't take that into consideration in the planning decision.
Sidewalks. Are there any sidewalks in this?
Short answer, yes, there'll be lots of sidewalks and paths.
Okay, but it's like, it's.
Right, again, thank you very much. If you're still listening on Zoom, please feel free to email your questions. Go to that website and there's a link there to email. And thank you also for joining.
You ever get disillusioned with municipal government? You could be the general manager. Sure, you're moving.
Yeah, we were looking at, sorry, something.
Oh, okay.